Hey everyone, and welcome to the Rumcast. Yes, this is the podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. My name is John Gulla, and with me is Will Hookinga. And today's episode features a great interview with Calbert Francis, Global Export Manager for Antigua Distillery Ltd, purveyor of English Harbour Rum and perhaps the lesser-known Cavalier Rum. But before we sail away into the Antigua Rum Harbor, Will, what's going on in your neck of the woods, and how are things with you as of late?
I'm good, John. I've been going through a lot of the responses we got from our previous episode, our little extra episode we did this month, where we talked about the rum community's reaction to the Appleton 17-year-old legend release, and the rum community responded to that episode. We got a bunch of great comments back, emails and such with ideas.
Unsurprisingly, right?
Yeah.
It's a hot topic. Yeah.
It was great to see, but I wanted to quickly go through some of these reactions, ideas, comments that we got back from the community. So I wanted to start with a past Rumcast guest, Kevin Crossman of the Ultimate Mai Tai, who I can, on the short list of people whose opinion that I wanted on this release, the Ultimate Mai Tai guy, the Ultimate Mai Tai Rum.
Yeah.
He commented specifically on the event idea that we discussed in the previous episode of, we posited, what if Appleton had set aside some bottles, sent them to, prominent rum bars throughout the world, and did some kind of cool events where people could come in, get a Mai Tai, get a little 1 ounce pour of it neat, and really experience the backstory behind the rum in a communal setting like that, with professionals mixing the Mai Tai for them. And Kevin liked that idea, and he actually went through the process of breaking down what he thought tickets to something like that would need to cost to make it viable. And he landed somewhere in the ballpark of $250, which when I saw that number, I was like, ooh, yeah, maybe the economics on that might not work. But he added that even if the price was $250 to $300, he'd be willing to attend if it were at a meaningful location like Smuggler's Cove or Trader Vic's in Atlanta, he listed. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And, I think in my mind, if Appleton were to do something like that, where they did those events, I think what they should do is, keep it a little bit more affordable on purpose, like maybe take a slight loss, because at the end of the day, it's marketing, right? It's like paying for advertisements. It's like grassroots marketing with the biggest rum lovers, biggest Mai Tai lovers on planet Earth. So I think there's a lot of good that could come out of that. Obviously, they're probably not going to do anything like that, so this is all wishful thinking, but it's fun to think about. And then lastly, Kevin also added this about the whole NFT piece of the release, which was part of what you and I thought might have set people off a little bit. He said, regarding the NFT thing, they really hyped people to get on their mailing list, quote, in order to be the first to purchase. Perhaps if they had explained how all of this would work ahead of time so we could register for the site, and if they had randomized the invites lottery style, then folks would have felt like, oh, I don't stand much of a chance, but at least I have a chance to get this for the MSRP. So I do think that's a good point, because I do remember saying the join our mailing list to be the first to know. And then I joined the mailing list, and then, the next thing I knew, half of those bottles had sold already. So that was kind of a surprise. Another one of my favorite comments came from Rumcast listener Phil, one of our patrons. He wrote, when I read about the NFTs, my reaction was, he said, when I read about the NFTs, my reaction was WTF. So just a great line.
Three different letters, right?
I enjoyed that. Yeah. And then the last one was Robbie, another Rumcast listener and patron. He said, I wouldn't be surprised to see Appleton come out with a new line designed to fill the gap left by the 17-year-old bottle. Yes, Joyce said they would never release this again because of the one mark that's a pain to ferment, but with the demand and hype over this release, maybe there's another line in the works that's close enough to the 17's profile that they can keep in circulation. I thought that was an interesting comment, and I was curious to get your take on that. Do you think that's something that would be viable, or that they would actually consider? And what do you think it would look like if they actually did decide to, we can't just put out this, we can't keep putting this out over and over again, but we can do something approximate? Like, what would that release look like?
Right. Well, I think it's a good thought, and I agree with that as well. And as for if it's filling a place in the lineup that they have, I think it just depends on how real different it is than the existing 15 and maybe the 21 or even the 12. And if it is true to that, and of course we haven't had a chance to try this rum, so we don't know. But if it is true that it really does bring a different side of Appleton, then I would say, sure, why not? Especially if it's embraced, especially if people are like, wow, this is great. And we super wish it was part of the regular lineup. And then they figure out an economical way to make that happen. If again, scaling it up, like we talked about in that episode, that, the economies of scale. And if you can scale it up, maybe it can be more affordable for them to do over time. So I do think it's something that is a possibility, but it has to be enough different than the 15 to really make sense for me.
The first place my mind went was, obviously I don't think they could just put out a 17-year release.
Right.
Just to me, that would be weird to have, 12, 15, 17, and 21. But what I think they could think about doing, this actually just occurred to me, is what if they just put out a 100% pot still release?
Right.
And I don't know, like, price wise where that would end up. In my mind, it's like somewhere around the 12 probably. And I don't think it needs to be that old either.
I was going to agree. Yeah.
It could even maybe be a no age statement release. Maybe it's just Appleton pot still.
Sure.
And it's kind of like a wink wink to the rum community that this is the Mai Tai rum. But it could also be marketed as something to sit, which is kind of what the 17-year release is anyway. Because I mean, it's a 17-year-old 100% pot still rum. Obviously, you're going to be able to sip this. At the same time, though, it's being positioned as the Mai Tai rum, which is It's kind of weird anyway. Because normally you wouldn't mix a 17-year-old rum in a cocktail in modern days anyway. So that's something that I think would maybe be worth exploring, is what does a 100% pot still Appleton mass market release look like? And, when I say mass market, maybe it could be a little bit more limited in availability. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be producing something like that at the same capacity that they're producing the signature or the 8-year, the 12-year, or the 15-year. It's probably a little bit more limited, but that would be something really cool. And I think something that would be differentiated not only within their portfolio, but also within just, the wider rum landscape. And another thing that's occurring to me just now is, I doubt the folks at Campari are looking over their shoulder right now at the Worthy Parks and Hamptons out there. But those are 100% pot still distilleries. And, over time, I think interest in those distilleries is only going to continue to build. So having your own 100% pot still release out there in the portfolio, maybe not a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has to appeal to, as you said, the mass market. That's kind of the catch-22 here, right? Does a 100% pot still release, whether it's an age statement or not, appeal enough to people? And then one of the ways that it could appeal enough to people is to say, this is a great mixer for a Mai Tai, right? Or other drinks. And it stands up in those cocktails. So that's not to say that some of the other Appleton products don't already do a pretty good job of that. I think they do. But the point there is it just specifically for the rum community? Because then it's back to like, well, do we need this to be a huge mass market, umpteen amount of bottle release or standard? Yeah.
And the tricky part then is like, how much the average person does it then overlap with the signature, which is kind of their go-to cocktail rum. In my mind, this was kind of like almost be their version of Denizen's Merchant's Reserve, which is designed to be the Mai Tai rum, right? Except that one's a blend of Jamaican and Martinique rum. So if they could get something in that wheelhouse that's 100% pot still, I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah. And I'll just tack on one other thing is maybe we can kind of split the difference here in a way. And what if this was an annual limited release?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be part of the main line, but it can be an annual limited release of, 3,000 bottles or 2,000 bottles or whatever it is, and test the market that way. If you've got a few annual releases that are now still on the shelf from 2 years ago, well, you don't need to keep making them. But if they're going away, there you go.
All right. Well, I think
that works.
I think we solved it. So there you go. But thanks to everyone who wrote in response to that episode. There were a bunch more reactions we got that we don't have time to read, but always great to go through those comments. And I'll be interested to see what the the reception is like once people actually start tasting it, that is everyone who gets their hand on a bottle who doesn't just, want to sell it immediately for a profit. But anyway, John, how are you doing? What's new in your world before we get to our interview?
I'm good. It was a long week, so I've treated myself to a few different samples that I've been sent.
All right.
I'm terrible, by the way. I'm terrible at like getting a sample from somebody, which, by the way, if you send me samples, thank you so much. Always appreciate it, but I don't always get to it right away. So I finally went back in my bar this week and I was like, well, of all these samples, which are some ones I want to try here that I haven't had a chance to yet? Or maybe I did try them when they immediately came in, but haven't gone back to them yet. And, we talk about you need multiple times to really ingest the idea of it. So I pulled out two samples that I was interested in, partly because we knew that we were talking with Calbert about some of the Antigua finished rums that they do, the port and the sherry cask, which you're going to hear about in the interview today. And so I wanted to look at some things that were maybe finished also. So I pulled out two. And the first one is the Rum Renaissance Pheno cask finish. I think this might be an exclusive from the Whiskey Exchange. And this is a Taiwanese rum. So Will, are you familiar with this?
Yeah, dude, we talked about this in our year in review episode last year.
That's right.
This is one of the rums that I talked about in there. Come on, don't you listen to the Rumcast?
I haven't been back to it since. And so I wanted to pull it back out because I know I do remember that you talked about it a little bit. And I had an initial sip of it, but I went back into it. And I have to say, I agree with you. This is really done well.
Yeah.
And initially, I think I had a different take on it. I can't remember now. I have to go back and listen to my own self-talk.
I think that I picked this as maybe most surprising rum. It was something like that where, my reaction was there's something very interesting here. It's not like 100%, oh, this is my favorite rum, but like, oh, there's something, there's something going on here.
Right. And for, my first experience with a Taiwanese rum, I think cask strength, all pot still, aged in new American oak. And I think that's what you had alluded to also, that was a trend that we were talking about with 1423 and Josh, right? So, new American oak for 2 years and then an extra 6 months in a Pheno sherry cask. And I really feel like this is a good example of how you can finish a rum where it's not overpowering. It brings something to the table. It's got a lot of good flavor to it. I really do like it. Do I think it's running for about $200 a bottle? I think.
Yeah,
that's on the expensive side, especially for something that's 2.5 years aged. But then I fight myself because I'm like, wait, but we talk about don't always look at the number on the bottle or the aging as an indicator of quality for a sipping rum. And it's 100%. I'm fighting myself thinking about that and how much I would have to pay to get a bottle of this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very limited release. It's from a very small distillery.
Fair.
So,
right.
Whiskey Exchange exclusive. So, you're paying for a lot of exclusivity and scarcity priced in to that rum.
Yeah.
So I think you have to keep that in mind, but it's certainly, it's a unique experience. It's something that I think of as like a library rum. It's like, oh, I don't have very many Taiwanese rums, if any Taiwanese rums. And at the same time, this is like, I don't remember if it's technically high ester or not, but it tastes like a higher ester rum. It's got some funkiness to it, very reminiscent of Jamaican funk. So, it's a unique experience. So
but I think
you're paying for that.
I think it's well curbed, that high ester, by the sherry cask influence, which is the new interesting part of it.
And then you got the sherry cask. So you're I was going to say fighting the aggressive flavors with aggressive maturation, but I don't want to make it sound like they're fighting each other because I do think it comes together rather nicely.
Well, speaking of fighting each other, the other one that I tried here, I think sometimes I can be pretty praising of most of the things I try because I love rum and, I like a lot of them.
Well,
there are some that I don't like.
It's more fun to talk about the things that you enjoy as opposed
That's a good point.
Crushing the things you don't like. I think for you and I anyway. I
agree with that. But this one I have to crush. I do not like this one at all. I pulled this out a couple of nights ago, like I said, went back and forth between these two. And I was just like, this is just not my jam. It is the European Independent Bottler Rum Deluxe Savannah Reunion Rum. It's an 8-year-old Grand Arome that's been aged in red wine casks.
Okay.
Now, I mistakenly thought this was finished as well, because that's what my intent was. I was trying to say, okay, I'm going to pull two finished, and I thought this was finished in some red wine casks. Well, I looked it up, and actually it's the full time, 8 years in red wine casks, which explains why this tastes like fighting between a red wine and a rum, and it just doesn't work at all. It's really, really off-putting is what I would use. So for 55% ABV, it also is around $200 a bottle. And I was just like, wow, this just goes to kind of show you why we don't see this happen, I think, very often. It's very hard to do even as a finishing process to add into rum some of these flavors. But the whole 8 years in red wine casks for this one, just, I mean, overpowered is too what would I say here? When I say it's overpowered, I would say that's not enough, not strong enough.
Yeah.
It's super gone. It is like, you get a lot of the tannins from that red wine, and it just really destroys anything in the rum for me. So,
I've tasted some rums like that before that had that kind of, I was going to say secondary maturation, but full maturation in a, what might be used as a secondary cask from time to time. And a lot of times when I've had one that I just think the cask influence is way too much, I wonder to myself, if this could have worked as a blending component, because you see like a lot of the Foursquare releases, for example, that involve another cask maturation. It's usually, it's not a finish. It's like some percentage of casks that went into this were ex-bourbon, some percentage of casks that went into this were, port or Madeira or sherry or whatever. And part of me wonders sometimes if producers that release something that is just way too much of whatever the cask is, a lot of times it's from either smaller IBs or it can be from new craft distilleries. I see that sometimes, and I'm like, man, if they could have blended this into something, I wonder if it could have worked. But again, a lot of times if you're smaller or if you're in kind of the single cask business, it's not really viable, I think, practically. So I've had a couple of samples of Savannah releases of their. Do you know is this like their high ester stuff?
I think it is a Grand Arome.
Okay, yeah, you said Grand. Yeah, that's my bad. I've had some of that was released from the distillery that I thought worked quite well. So I think a lot of that, just goes to show that.
Well, I don't think the rum is of poor quality. I think you can pick up on the rum being right. The rum itself, I think, is a good quality rum, and that really comes through even at 8 years. But what I just get way too much of is that it's. I get that a lot of times an independent bottler is going to want to do a limited release that is really off profile or really different than anything else that's out on the market because you're trying to go there. And I'm okay with that. I think I've asked for that, I think, on this program before, where I talk about like, hey, let's take some risks. Let's do some things. So, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, I guess. But in this case, it's just a reminder to me that, there's some things that probably are left better undone, and one of them is a strong red wine cask for that long mixed with a good rum. So
well, on the note of finishes, as you alluded to earlier, it was finishes that kind of brought this episode together, because when we were in Miami, well, you're always in Miami. When I was in Miami for Miami Rum Congress, we went up to Calbert and he tasted us through Antigua Distillery's English Harbour cask finish lineup there, and we both
expertly tasted us through.
He was
very good. Yes,
So we both really enjoyed that experience and loved just a lot of the backstory that Calbert was giving us, and wanted to have him on the show to just go deep into kind of the history of Antigua Distillery, because it predates the English Harbour brand by quite a bit and has kind of a unique origin story, I would say, and is really interesting. And English Harbour itself, its kind of evolution over the last few years, I think if you're a rum geek, you've seen that they've put out a lot of releases either themselves or through IBs like Velier that are interesting and different, high congener, Corps de Saval, things like that. And so we got into a lot of, the production differences between those and what we might see in the future from them in the way of interesting, unique, different releases and things like that. So it was a good conversation, and I'm excited for people to hear it.
Yeah. I think he's just a really magnetic personality.
Yeah.
And that comes across in so many ways with how he's able to talk from his experience there, being from Antigua, and about all the things that happen. And we get into a lot of talking about some of the cultural events that happen on Antigua as well. And it was really
carnival
fun
season. It's coming up. So we got into that. We heard about Calbert's Wolf Pack, which is amazing. Right. It makes me want to go there to witness that in person. So
the best carnival in the Caribbean, according to Calbert.
According to Calbert, yeah. So with all that said, let's take a quick break and we'll go over to the interview. All right, we are here with Calbert Francis, the Global Export Manager for Antigua Distillery Ltd, makers of English Harbour Rum. Calbert, we got a chance to catch up with you recently in Miami, and you were a very welcome sight to both of us because not only for your fantastic personality, but the fact that you had a fine selection of English Harbour rums there, both all of which are very hard for John and I to find. I know he has a hard time in Miami. There's none up here in Nashville. So when I'm traveling, I look for opportunities to try English Harbour, and it was great to get a chance to do that. We tasted through some of the cask finishes there with you, and hearing you kind of talk us through those, we knew we had to get you on the podcast. So we've been looking forward to this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me and for all the kind words.
Yeah. So is it you just before we kick things off, you were telling us it's about to be carnival down there. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. What does that look like? I've never been to Antigua. I don't know what all goes into the celebration. What is it like for someone who's never experienced it?
Okay, so technically carnival in every other place in the world is like it's a weekend, right?
Okay.
But Antigua's carnival, the tagline for it is the greatest summer festival. And
nice.
The reason behind that, you have like 10 days of partying.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
And like in other Caribbean countries where their climax is Juve, and then they have either 1 or 2 days on the road where they display their costumes. Like for us, we have 3 days on the road, right? So, like our road experience is a lot more extensive than all of the other Caribbean islands.
Okay.
So take, for example, in Trinidad, where they have Carnival Monday and Carnival Tuesday. And like Barbados, they only have the Monday.
Okay.
In Antigua, we have, at the opening of our carnival, we have what's called T-shirt mass. And T-shirt mass is indigenous to Antigua. No other carnival has T-shirt mass.
Oh, cool. What happens there?
So basically, imagine around 10 to 12,000 persons on the road.
Okay.
And they're behind big music trucks. You have mobile bars on the road.
Wow.
And
so it's like a big time parade kind of.
Yes.
All right.
But instead of being in costumes, you have themed T-shirts. So the different mass bands. So in Antigua, you have bands like Dumb Street, Icons, Fantasy 268, Mist, Insane. They all have their different themes that they use for the T-shirt mass, right? So take, for example, like Mist, they always do something that's a bit, tropical and that sort of stuff. Insane, the person who runs Insane, he's ex-military.
Okay.
So his stuff always has to do with some military term,
right?
So, and the shirts that they are donned in to the theme that they are portraying. And then they're judged at the end of the festivities to see who had the best T-shirt mask portrayal.
Oh,
right?
Got it.
So that is 100% Antigua. Nowhere else has it. What everybody else has is Carnival Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
Right? Some only have Carnival Monday. So for those who have Monday and Tuesday, you have what's called your Monday wear, where it's almost like a suit, a body suit for the females, some hot shots for the guys and everything. And it's a parade again. except, the route would be different.
Gotcha.
Right?
You go to different places.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then for the Tuesday now, that's the long day on the road when we're all in your costumes, your feathers, and all that sort of stuff. And again, while you're on the parade, you have your mobile trucks with your music, you have your bars and all that sort of stuff. So like for the Antigua Distillery, we're celebrating our 90th anniversary this year. And what we decided to do was to put a mass band on the road as part of the 90th celebrations.
Okay,
so
nice.
What we did is we merged a few of the smaller bands together to make one big band. And it's a combination of traditional mass with the new age mass that's happening right now. To really give it this pizzazz.
Yeah.
That those smaller bands and the traditional bands would normally be able to offer their patrons. So for something like that, like for the Antigua Distillery, we have a distribution company as well. So we're going to feature all of our brands. We're doing like a wine and Prosecco bar on the road. We're doing cabana trucks on the road. So we're doing a lot of different things that the other bands are not doing and catering to a completely different clientele.
Wow. So, well, first of all, like, take that, rest of the Caribbean. Right? your carnival is not as good as Antigua's. And second of all, I have to know, can you tell us what your T-shirts say? Are you allowed to say that right now, or is it a secret?
Yeah, the name of the band is called Sections. And, if I share my screen, I can actually show you what the logo is for the band if you want me to do that.
Yeah. You should be able to share it now.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Let me just do this.
I feel like we made a major error in not doing this interview in person, John. This sounds like the time
we should be there for Carnival, of course.
All right. So let me get to this and let me share this screen. That's
nice.
Oh, cool. So it's got like a puzzle pieces theme. I love it.
Yes, because you have different bands making up the band. So, it's like putting the bands together. So that's all the puzzle pieces. Yeah, that's how it came together.
That's
very
awesome.
Cool.
Love it. Well, now that we've had kind of a taste of the what's happening currently in Antigua, in getting ready for this interview, I was kind of watching some other interviews, reading some of the backstory, and there's this whole really interesting history behind the distillery that I didn't know that much about, where you had this kind of Antigua, correct me if I'm wrong, has a history of having all these sort of little rum shops on the island that historically would buy rum from elsewhere in the Caribbean and, make their own kind of blends, do their own special twist on it and release it and sell it. And then in the 30s, a group of rum shop owners come together and decide, why don't we make our own rum? Yeah. And that's kind of when it takes off. But English Harbour doesn't come into the picture until much later. So can you just kind of bring us up to speed on how everything came together and when sort of English Harbour entered the picture?
Sure, no problem. So as you rightfully said, so our founders, they came from the island of Madeira and they came to the island as indentured servants. And so if you follow the story about indentured servants, you had 3 sets that came to the Caribbean. You have the Indians that went further south. That's why the Trinidadians and the Guyanese, they have this Indian ethnicity.
Right.
The Chinese, they went as far west as Jamaica. And that's why too, you have some of those Jamaicans with last name like Kong and Chin and all that sort of stuff. But the Europeans,
shout out to Zan.
Yes, shout out to Zan. Yes. Right. But then you have the Europeans who settled further north. Now, Antigua is one of the driest islands in the entire Caribbean. And we're actually in the middle of a 4-year drought right now.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the Europeans, their bodies were not made out for this type of climate and doing that sort of heavy labor intensive work. So a lot of them suffered from heat stroke. So our guy said, you know what, to hell with this, this is too labor intensive for us. They just quit. Now, as an indentured servant, you were paid a salary, your passage was paid to come to the island, and when your contractual duties were up, they would pay to send you back. Mm-hmm. So because our guys abandoned their jobs, they had no way of getting back.
Right.
So in order to make a living, that's when they started blending rums and opened rum shops that you referenced in what's now the capital city of Antigua. Started making their own blends and selling it. And so they figured since Antigua had so much sugar, there must be an abundance of molasses. So why not pool our resources together, form our own distillery, sell rum to ourselves in allotment, and then whatever was left over, they would send back to Europe to make some additional money.
Sure.
And between the 8 founders, they were able to raise 2,800 pounds, which is about 56,000 pounds in today's money. Mm-hmm. And that's what they used to start the distillery. They approached the colonial government for land. The government thought it was a great idea, but they didn't want to give them any land on the mainland of Antigua. Mm-hmm. So they stuck them on this little island off the coast of Antigua called Rat Island.
Right. I remember reading about Rat Island. Yeah.
Right. So
sounds wonderful.
We've got the perfect place. We've got the perfect place for your distillery. I'm surprised that didn't end up becoming the brand name. I mean, Rat Island Rum, you know, it's got a nice ring to it. The good premium rum brand, right?
It's not that it wasn't a thought, but you know, we've made jokes about it, you know, during product development meeting when we're coming up with something and we said, hey, let's call it Rat Island, whatever. And
somebody was like, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm gonna rethink that. Focus group it a little bit.
Yeah, so you know, so they stuck us on Rat Island, and when the distillery opened in 1932 and then incorporated in 1933, we weren't making any rums under the Antigua Distillery belt. We were just making rums for the founders to supply their different rum shops.
Okay.
And then in the 1940s, an estate owner was leaving the island, and his estate was up for sale. And the group, the Antigua Distillery Group, was able to purchase that estate.
Was this like a sugar estate?
Yeah.
Got it.
So that estate was called Montpelier Estate. Okay. And on that estate, we used to make our own molasses.
Okay.
So the molasses that we used to make was called Muscovado molasses. The first rum that the Antigua Distillery made was called Muscovado Cavalier Rum. Now, I know this is being pre-recorded, correct? So you guys are going to try. So if you just give me 1 second, let me just dash out. Let me show you.
Go for it. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we love it.
All right.
Right. We got some bottles.
This is Muscovado Cavalier Rum.
Wow.
And it was called Muscovado Cavalier Rum because of the molasses that was used to make this product.
Right. How old is that bottle?
So this bottle is probably from the 1950s.
Nice.
Wow.
So this is part of the trophy case in my managing director's office.
Okay.
And basically it was maybe about close to 8 to 10 years ago, when one of the older family members passed away. After the funeral and everything, and they were cleaning out all of the stuff that was there, all of the remains and stuff, and they came across this bottle.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, there's no better place to have it than, you know, with the Antigua Distillery, so could use for show and tell.
Good. I'm glad nobody tucked it under their shirt or something.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like, you know, it has the story behind of it and everything and so on. It's really, really cool.
Did you give it a try?
If I can, I can try to read it for you.
Or no, I meant did you taste it when they gave you the bottle?
Oh yes, I did. Yes, I did. It's unlike anything that you'd have today.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Like, how does it compare? How does it compare to a more modern Antigua rum?
It's really pungent as well. You know, it's different from what you would normally have.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So you know, so when we had that estate in the early 1950s now, when steam generation was becoming a bit outdated, they couldn't get change parts for the equipment at the estate.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to shut that down. And then they started buying regular molasses from the Antigua Sugar Factory,
Okay.
which was no longer Muscovado. And so they had to take Muscovado from the name. And that's how we ended up with this baby right here.
The regular Cavalier.
Cavalier Rum, yes. Which is our number one seller in the entire portfolio.
Still to this day?
Still to this day.
Wow. And is that, do you export any of that, or is that all sold in Antigua?
We do exports within the region.
Okay.
Right, but I would say 90% of it is sold in Antigua.
Gotcha.
So with the story now behind Cavalier is that once we started doing Cavalier really took off. And the company has been synonymous with sailing for decades, right? And so Cavalier grew in so much popularity that we started to get a lot of inquiries to export Cavalier.
Okay.
You know? And so by the time we put things in place to export Cavalier, we quickly realized that we could only export Cavalier within the region and nowhere else. And that's because you had someone who came to the island, fell in love with the product, went back to the US, and they trademarked everything Cavalier.
Oh,
So
no.
Yes, they trademarked Cavalier Rum, Cavalier Gin, Cavalier Vodka.
That's not cool.
They even trademarked a Cavalier Bourbon and a Cavalier Tequila.
Wow.
So
just total asshole move.
Yeah.
So
very Cavalier approach, you might say.
When did that happen?
That was before my time.
Okay.
This was back in the 1980s, somewhere around there.
Got it.
And so then in order to export Antiguan rum, we had to come up with a different name. And that gave birth to English Harbour Rum.
All right.
Okay.
Right? So English Harbour Rum was launched back in 1993 when they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of Antigua Sailing Week. But I say this, and I say this proudly, right? Antiguans, we are the most stubborn set of people on the face of the earth. And once we are accustomed to something, right? Only by the grace of God.
I haven't picked up any stubbornness from you. So this comes as a surprise, I feel like.
So when they launched English Harbour, everybody was like, English Harbour? Like, we don't want your English Harbour. Like,
right. We want Cavalier. Get like Cavalier.
Cavalier is a rum. We know Cavalier is a rum. We love Cavalier is a rum.
Yeah.
So you can actually take English Harbour, you can dump it in English Harbour because English Harbour is an actual place.
Right. Yeah.
And so some of the reasons behind giving the product that name was because a lot of the inquiries were coming from the sailing community. And in English Harbour, that's the mecca of sailing, or the capital of sailing in Antigua.
Right.
That's where all of the major regattas happen. There's a World Heritage UNESCO site there for Nelson's Dockyard, right? And everything. So we figured people seeing English Harbour on a bottle, they will be able to connect the dots easily. Right. And like, hey, this is Antiguan rum. But the Antiguans rejected it. They wanted no part of English Harbour. So we actually shelved the product. And in 1999, 2000, we then re-released the product as a 5-year-old rum, changed the packaging and everything. And out of fear of rejection, we didn't launch a product in Antigua. Wow. We launched a product in Canada. We launched a product in Canada, right? And worked our way through the US. And between 1999, 2000, and 2006, the product won so many awards that Forbes magazine had it labeled as one of the top 10 most remarkable rums in the world. It was the only 5-year-old rum to make the list. All the other rums were aged at least 8 years and older. And it was after that we brought the product back home to Antigua, started a campaign around that.
We told you.
And fast forward to today, even though Cavalier is still our number one seller, in the local circles, you have more locals calling for English Harbour than they do call for Cavalier.
They're not throwing it in the English Harbour anymore.
No.
That's such a cool story because I talk to Canadian rum lovers all the time, and I know they have so many frustrations trying to get good rum brands into Canada. And so the fact that that's how English Harbour, became a success, was by starting out in Canada is so unique and unexpected. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to keep going on the lines of history also a little bit. You mentioned molasses also. And I know in more recent times, there's not really any more sugar production in Antigua, is my understanding now, even though there's a lot of relics of it across the island. So you're importing molasses now for English Harbour, I believe, but has there been any thought to maybe reestablishing some of that sugarcane production on the island, maybe specifically for your rum?
It's something that is being discussed, and that is all I can say about that. I don't want to release too much.
Okay.
Being discussed. That. It's being discussed.
That's great. It's being discussed. Things can't happen if they're not discussed first.
Yes,
so
that is so
I'm totally
true.
with you. Cool.
So talking about the rum itself, I think Antigua Distillery is interesting because it's one of those, and this happens in a few other islands or countries throughout the Caribbean, but you not only define the rum style for your own brands, but you kind of define it for all of Antigua, because you're the only rum distillery there right now, unless something has changed in the last couple of years that I'm not aware of. But I'd love if you could kind of walk us through the production process a little bit to give people a sense of, how does this compare to production styles of other countries? Is this more like Jamaica, where there's all this emphasis on fermentation? Is it, like other countries where it's more distillation and aging? Kind of what does it all look like?
So what I would say before I get into that is that our product is a truly handcrafted product, right? And I know a lot of other brands, they have bastardized that term, handcrafted, right? So I try to explain to people, why, we're truly handcrafted.
Yeah.
So as I said, we're 90 years, right? And the way we made rum back then is the same way we're making rum right now, right?
Except for the Muscovado molasses, right?
For the Muscovado, yes. 90% of what you see inside of any one of our bottles is done by hand. The only automated part of our process is the filling and labeling. And
Got it.
That's it. So from the start of the fermentation, we have what we call bub tanks, right? And so with our bub tanks, this is where the germination process happens, where we add some molasses into the tank, a little water, and then we use yeast, baker's yeast, to start the fermentation process. Now, the reason why we affectionately call them bub tanks is because when the germination process is happening and you just rest your hand on one of these tanks, you can feel the warmth and all the activity happening inside, like if it's bubbling.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we call them bub tanks. So we have bub tank 1, bub tank 2.
I like it.
And the aim with this process is to get about 20 million yeast cells, right, per tank. Once we get that, then the fermentation process starts, where we empty all of that in, add some more molasses, add some water, and we do a short fermentation process. By 36 to 40 hours, our fermentation is complete, and then we start with the distillation. Now, with our distillation unit, it's very unique because we use a continuous column copper still. So it's copper from start to finish. And the brand is John Doe, but it is a coffee design. So it was originally supposed to be 2 stills, but because of the height of the distillery, we had to modify it into 4 columns. Sorry, not 2 stills. It's supposed to be 2 columns. Sorry.
Right.
And we had to modify it to 4 columns in order to get it to fit. The 5th column, however, is from the old still that the distillery used to have. That still was installed, I think 1962 or 1964, around there. And that was a French style still called Saval. So I make this little chuckle that the Antigua Distillery is the only place in the world that you get the French and the English working together to produce anything that's noteworthy, right? Because the distill that does the bulk of the work is an English still, John
Right.
Hall.
Yeah.
And the rectification column is a French column, right?
Right.
So it's Saval, right? And all of that was fused together. So technically, when you look at it, you can call it a hybrid copper still because it's from two different still makers.
Right.
So, but what that does is that it makes our rums, because it's copper from start to finish throughout the whole process, our rums are normally light to medium in body with a very clean finish. And that is something that, we get like every show that I go to, and any opportunity I get for tasting, consumers are always saying that the finish is so clean. And the reason the finish is so clean is because of that constant contact with copper. Then after distillation, we then age in once-use bourbon cask like everybody else. But because Antigua is so hot and dry, it tends to accelerate the aging. So our rums tend to taste a bit more mature than the age statement. But when it comes to blending, we blend in oak tanks instead of stainless steel tanks. Two of the tanks that we have are as old as the company.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Right. So, and then we just had 2 new tanks that were installed. One was installed in 2020, and I think the other one was installed in 2018. That has basically quadrupled our output.
Wow.
So, and then in terms of blending, the blending, again, all of this that I'm describing, all of it is done by hand. Right. So, if my distillers are having a bad day, I'm going to get bad product. Right? And then it's going to translate into more work for the master distiller, the master blender to do when it's time for his blending. Right. So, there's a lot of different components that come together, and that blending process, right, in terms of the barrel selections, even the way we rotate our barrels inside, it's very hands-on.
Yeah.
For want of better words, as to what we do. And that's why, I say it's truly handcrafted because of all the different touch points that's happening with human interaction. And then in terms of our style, it's really light to medium body with a real clean finish. If I was supposed to define it in a nutshell. Keep it simple.
It's nice to hear all of that. And actually, I noticed on the ADL website, it does a really good job also of kind of walking people through the steps or the stages of the process of rum making. It seems like you all are very transparent with all of that. I did want to ask about one specific thing that's on the website, which was during the aging. It says, basically, rum is not rum unless it has been aged in oak barrels. I presume, I see you smiling and laughing already. I presume that probably has to do with, Antigua rum, and how your viewpoint is for that. But I wanted to ask you a little bit of, about that, and if you kind of see or stand by that statement, or how that would work in your mind.
So basically, it has to be aged in wood, So it could be American oak, it could be French oak. There's the way I see it, right? Different types of wood gives you different styles. And if everybody was just sticking to the same old thing, yes, climate plays a difference, vegetation plays a difference, and all that sort of stuff. But you need some sort of variety, right? And so for us, we use oak barrels, American oak, but that's not a beginning and an all. And anyone can choose whatever they want to choose to do.
Sure. But for like unaged product also, that wouldn't be considered rum in Antigua.
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Because our white rum is unaged.
Right. So like meaning an unaged rum, that hasn't seen an oak barrel, but you'd still consider that rum. Is that like, do people drink that also in Antigua?
Well, white rum is not a big volume mover in Antigua. We're technically not a white spirits market, we're a brown spirits market, right? So The only white spirit that really gets consumed in any sort of abundance would be vodka, but it's nowhere close to rum consumption or brandy consumption, or so
Really? So,
those.
so there even vodka would be more popular than like an unaged white rum?
Yeah.
Wow, that's surprising to me.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to, you were talking about the still and how it was supposed to be a 2-column still, but it didn't fit inside the distillery. I had to ask, did they know that in advance, or did they find out when the still arrived at the distillery?
I want to believe is when the still arrived at the distillery.
Wow.
And so the person who dealt with the installation of that still works with us up to this day.
Okay,
and that still was installed in 1991.
Okay.
It was commissioned in 1991.
There's got to be a good story in there of when that showed up, and they look at the building, they look at the still, and think, might be a tight squeeze.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but I should get the backstory behind that, and the next time I see you guys, I'll tell you that story.
Right? Yeah, part 2.
Yeah.
One other thing that's kind of interesting about the aging is I was watching an interview that Anthony Bento from the distillery was giving a couple of years ago, and the subject of oak chips came up, which, as I understand, was a practice at the distillery where some barrels also had oak chips used in there to kind of give you some more flexibility in some cases. But I think he mentioned that was a practice that the distillery stopped a couple of years ago. So I was just curious to kind of hear, your take on, the original reason for that, and then what led you to stop doing it.
So the original reason was because of the shortage of barrels that happened.
Oh, got it.
About a decade ago. And so we tend to only use our barrels for 2 life cycles, right? For 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and our tenure for 1 cycle. But because we were having some issues in terms of sourcing barrels, then there were some barrels that we had to use some chips in, right? But once barrels became available, then that was a practice that was stopped.
Gotcha. Every time I see an article or anything about barrel shortages, I start to get a little worried, I just saw one the other day. It was more focused on the bourbon industry, because they need new barrels. But my mind was instantly thinking, I wonder if this means, 10, 15 years from now, rum is going to feel this.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. One other thing, I think you spoke to this, that you a couple years ago expanded your fermentation capacity, which maybe that means more bub tanks now. But I wanted to ask, since doing that, I would imagine that allows you to produce more rum, expand capacity, but also has it given you any kind of extra room to do any experimentation with other kinds of fermentation or anything like that?
Yeah, we've done some longer fermentation, some stuff that is a bit high congener, some stuff that's a bit more funky, but those we've done for limited releases, mostly in Europe. We've only done 1 such release in the US, and that was with a partnership with the guys from Smuggler's Cove.
Right.
So, but we have done at least 3 or 4 limited releases of stuff that is high congener, a bit more funky, but it was all in Europe.
Okay. Well, we may have to talk about, I don't know, maybe there should be a second release, maybe the Rumcast could get in there and do a little special English Harbour release. We'll continue that conversation later, but that's cool to hear.
Yeah.
Calbert, you mentioned the old Saval still was replaced in 91. I know, or my understanding is that the 25-year English Harbour release, that was either all rum made from that Saval still, and that is run out or is running out. I was hoping you could shed a little bit of light on that and let me know. Are we ever going to have a chance to buy that rum again?
So the short answer is yes.
Oh,
that's
yes.
a good short answer.
Good news. All right.
That's a short answer, right?
Okay.
So
We're
we
here
do
for the
have-
long answer, though. We love the long answer, so we don't have to stop at the short answer.
So our 25-year-old or 1981 vintage, that is extremely special stuff inside of a bottle. I say to people, if ever you have the chance to taste or own that bottle, you're owning a piece of Antiguan history, right? Because 1981 was the year Antigua gained independence from Britain. And so that rum was distilled to commemorate our independence from Britain. It's also the last remaining rum that was distilled on the Serval still. All the rums that were produced between after 1981 up until 1991, when that still was decommissioned, has all been used up in different blends. So this is the only stuff that is left back. And we have, I think, maybe about 14 or 16 bottles. I have it sitting in a warehouse in New Jersey. And hopefully on my next visit to the US, I'll be able to say which markets it will go to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
I was gonna say, if we need to meet you in New Jersey or something, let us know.
So the short answer is yes, you'll be able to buy it again. It may just be online. You know, it may end up being online,
right?
So that, you know, no matter what state you are in, you have the opportunity to purchase it. So that's another thought as well.
That sounds great. Well, let me ask you this also, since it's been long enough, I think, since the new still was put to start distilling, do you have 25-year-old stocks of the new still? And can you? No, nothing.
No, we don't. But we do have something coming out later this year that is very old as well.
Okay,
not quite 25, but
I'm not quite 25. But I've been with the company for 18 years, and this is older than my tenure.
Okay.
I like that.
We've got a window there. We know it's somewhere in 18 to 25. Yeah.
All right. Maybe a little set there, you know, both of those, you know, we can figure something out there. It sounds like you got great stuff coming. So that's awesome.
Yeah, man, we have some really good stuff coming on, man. Really, really great stuff.
Speaking of, you know, special releases, I heard that you were kind of instrumental or the mastermind behind the 40th anniversary bottling of English Harbour that came out a couple of years ago. And so I wanted to, you know, since we have you here, I'd love if you could, you know, kind of take us through the making of that rum and sort of the role you had in bringing it to life.
So that project almost didn't happen.
That's how the best stories begin, right?
Keyword is almost, yeah.
That project almost didn't happen. But, you know, it was like, so we're celebrating our 40th anniversary of independence. And I wanted to do something for the Antiguan market. It was never, ever exported, right? Because being the intermediary between the end consumer and the company, you know, our palate in Antigua is not extremely complex. Like the rum culture in Antigua, right, is that we mix everything. Doesn't matter how old the spirit is, doesn't matter how nice it is.
That's why you have those bottles in New Jersey.
We mix everything, right? Yeah. And I have a saying: drink what you like and how you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to throw some 25-year into some juice, go for it.
Exactly, because rum is supposed to be enjoyed.
Yeah,
agreed.
And if I spend $6,000 on a bottle, nobody can tell me how to consume it.
That's true. Yeah. I agree. It still hurt a little bit, but I agree with you.
Right. So based on that, I decided that, hey, I wanted to do something catered to the Antiguan palate because, like, for our cast finishes and that we did the port, the sherry and Madeira.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It is 95% of that is exported.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I've got comments from consumers that, hey, you know, they like to see what we're doing overseas, but, you know, they think that some of the rums that we make is just not for the locals. And then when they see those same products getting all the traction in the international market, they're like, why didn't you leave more here? Why can't you get more?
Right. Yeah.
So based on that, the 40th anniversary of independence gave me the opportunity to do something that was really for the Antiguan palate.
Yeah.
Right. And so understanding that the main driver or the main characteristic that Antiguans look for when it comes to any spirit is how smooth it was. Right? How smooth it is and its mixability. So we had to get something that is like super smooth and, being able to mix with just about
versatile.
Right? Had to be extremely versatile, correct?
Yeah.
And so based on that, I had a conversation with our master blender and our master blender consultant. And I said, listen, I needed to check our HA roll stock and see what we have and see what we can blend it with and all that sort of stuff. And so, it was a blend of rums up to 11 years old. And so when I tasted the blend, I was like, wow. Like, wow. Like they hit the nail right on the head. And up to this day, I have people still coming up to me. Like when we released that 40th anniversary, all of it sold out in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And we did around 1,600 bottles.
Wow.
Right. And all of it. So, and we had a limit of 2 bottles per person.
That must have been a cool experience, for you to get to put something together and see it kind of take off so much at home. That's really cool.
Yeah. And so up to this day, people see me in the streets and they're like, are you guys not going to bring back that 40th anniversary? Like, when are we going to get some more 40th anniversary? And some people say, oh, I wish I could have taken more because after I drank the first bottle and I'm there looking at the second bottle, I'm trying to figure out whether I should keep it as a souvenir or if I should crack it open and that sort of stuff. So it was really cool getting all that feedback, seeing people, really subscribing to it, the rate at which it was sold and all that good stuff. So yeah, that was really satisfying for me.
I think what you should aim for is to get to a point where you can put that out all the time. And then instead of calling it, the 40th anniversary blend, you could just call it like the Francis blend or something.
Yeah.
Get your name out there on it,
There you go.
You got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, probably.
So we've been around in some of these different releases that you've done. I know. So you have the standard 5-year, like you mentioned earlier. There's a 10-year release. I know that I've seen around a little bit. And then the aforementioned legendary 25-year that might come around once in a blue moon. And then out of New Jersey. And then there's the other stuff. You kind of passed right through it, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about these port and sherry cask finished rums. And I know you mentioned there's a Madeira one that was released, I think, only in Europe, but the port and the sherry were also available in the US. And I think my understanding was there was almost like a first batch of them, and then they came back as like a second batch. And I was wondering, were there any changes between those batches, or was it simply like, well, they all sold, next batch is up, or like, how did that all come together?
So basically, when the company celebrated our 85th anniversary, we wanted to do something different to give our rums a different profile. And on the CARICOM rum standards for rum, you're not allowed to add any flavors or season your barrels and that sort of stuff.
Right.
So in order to give it a different profile, we chose to do cask finishes. And we chose 3 finishes that either had something to do with the company or with rum in general in the island and the Caribbean. So Port and Madeira, obviously, because of where our founders came from. They came from the island of Madeira, of course.
Makes sense. Right. The sherry now, before Antigua was an English colony, when it was rediscovered, it was named, it was given the name Santa Maria de la Antigua, Spain. Right.
But when the English captured the island, they removed the Santa Maria mumbo jumbo and just called the island Antigua. But And I'm sure you guys would have heard this as well. Early traces of rum being shipped back to Europe. When the Spaniards were coming over, they were bringing sherry with them. And when they wanted to take back rum, they had nothing to put the rum in. So they were putting them in sherry casks and transporting them back over. So that's where the sherry came in. So we chose those 3 casks because of the historic ties that it has, either with the company or the history of rum in Antigua and the Caribbean. Yeah. So with our cask finishes, the base spirit is our 5-year-old rum. After being 5 years, then we take the rum out of the once-used bourbon cask, and then we put them in port, sherry, or Madeira cask. And then they stay inside of those casks for a couple of months. So for the sherry, that stayed in cask for about 4 to 5 months. The Madeira, well, for the first batch, if we go to the first batch, so all the batches are different.
Okay.
I will confirm that. All the batches are different. So when we started the cask finishes, the first cask that we experimented was the sherry cask. And we just chucked rum inside of it and we left it there for 6 months. But the casks were fairly new and they were extremely powerful. We didn't realize how powerful those casks were.
Yeah.
When we went back after 6 months, the rum was more like a sherry.
Yeah.
And less of a rum.
Right.
Yeah.
What we had to do is that the original plan was whatever we got, we were going to add 8% 10-year-old to the final blend to round it out, and then bottle at 46 instead of 40. And I'll tell you why we do that.
Yeah, but which we appreciate. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So with the sherry now, we actually had to add 17 or 18% of 10-year-old to that first batch.
Balance out the sherry.
In order
Got it.
Right? And so the reason we bottle at 46 is because we don't do chill filtration at the distillery. So in order to eliminate any hazing from occurring, we had to raise the alcohol content. At least 43, but we did it to 46 for a couple of reasons. One, our Canadian market has always been clamoring for something that is a bit more warming than our 40% expressions or standards.
Yeah, and don't leave us United States people out either. We're clamoring just as much as them Canadians.
We
clamor too.
And the second reason is, I've spent over 18 years in this industry. I've never once heard anybody complain about too much alcohol. So we decided to give you that extra 3%. That extra 3%, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For all your support. But the port and the Madeira, the Madeira is about 6 months, and the port goes all the way up to 9 months with the initial batch. And that's because the port casks that we had, they were extremely old. They were used to age vintage tawny port, right? And so the transformation or the integration with the spirit takes a bit longer than the sherry and the Madeira cask. So each one of these casks, they have their own personality, where the port is the most subtle in the range, because the transformation is not as pronounced as the other expressions. Right. The cherry is the most flamboyant. That's the one that has the most to say. It's very spicy, in nature, and that's a showpiece.
It talks back to you.
Yes.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
The Madeira, on the other hand, is the most selfish in the range, right? And the reason I say it's the most selfish in the range is because it doesn't play well with others. As I mentioned before, the culture in Antigua is a mixing culture. So anything that we produce, we always do a mixability study. Right. And so with the Madeira, we found the only thing that mixed well with it was PV3 Madagascan cola. Everything else was a no. So the Madeira was basically saying to us, I don't want to be mixed with anything. I don't really care who wants to mix. I want to be consumed neat, right? Yep. And so that's why, that its personality is, the self.
Is a diva. Madeira is a diva.
So we're actually on batch 4 now of the sherry.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize there was that many. Okay.
Yeah. So because of the turnover time.
Sure. Yeah.
Sherry, it's much shorter than the others. And
I see.
Yes. And we're on batch 3 of the Madeira and batch 3 of the port. The batch 3 of the Madeira was just bottled and going to be packed in a container next week, and it's off to Europe.
So do you have to, as you continue with those batches, is it each one kind of a case-by-case basis in determining length or proportion of older rum that gets added to it? Or is it like closer to being like dialed in now, like you know exactly, what you have each time?
So basically what we do now is, and this was before we did a reset of the US market, is that all of it was being shipped to Europe. Mm-hmm. So I would say to my my European distributors, hey, we're planning next year's allocation of cask finishes, and let me know what your desire is.
So and then you want a little more sherry influence, a little less sherry influence, like that?
So based on what their desires are, then there's an aggregate amount, and then we work that back to see how much rum we really need to put into the cask.
Okay.
How much cask, yeah. And then if it is a situation, we only have a limited amount of cask. So then if we don't have the amount that everybody's asking for, then I would do the allocation based on the amount of the other SKUs that they sell. So basically, if you sell a lot of English Harbour 5 and 10, then you get more of the cask finishes than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome.
So you have to be the guy who has to deliver the bad news of, hey, I'd love to give you more sherry, but you got to get those English Harbour numbers up next year, right?
Those rookie numbers. You got to pump those numbers up.
So I know in addition to the cask finishes, there's been a number of kind of interesting limited releases in recent years. I know Vellier put some stuff out. There was the Coeur de Saval release, the High Congener series. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear a little bit more about particularly the Coeur de Saval and the High Congener, what sort of pushed you to do those in the first place, and then, what you change about the production process in order to make those. And it sounds like with the High Congener, it's some fermentation stuff, but I'd love to just hear a little bit more about those.
So for the Coeur de Saval, that was another interesting piece.
Yeah.
So our previous master blender and cellar master, they were able to convince my managing director to do something crazy, right? Where they wanted to produce a product that was really the essence of that Saval column, meaning with as little alteration as possible. So normally when we produce rum, when we're done distilling, it comes off the still at 95%.
Yeah.
And then we break it down to 70% and then put it in barrels to age. So what these guys said is that, hey, what we want to do, we want to add less water. So they diluted down to 80%. And instead of using once-used bourbon casks, they actually use new casks that were lightly toasted. So it would not have that heavy bourbon influence.
Yeah.
And so they were able to convince my managing director to do something crazy, which he agreed. He said, but I'm only going to give you guys 8 barrels. I'm only going to give you 8 barrels to run your little experiment, right? So he did that, but then a couple of years afterwards, our master blender, he moved to the US, and our cellar master also moved. So we had a new master blender and cellar master. And so our cellar master now, he was in the cellar doing his annual 2-year rotation of barrels and saw these 8 barrels. So the way we stack our barrels, they're stacked. We no longer stack them on the side because of the evaporation. So we stack them standing up.
Pallets.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Right. And so they're roughly 4 barrels on a pallet. Okay. So he saw these barrels all by themselves, and they looked completely different from
the hell's going on over here.
Yes, right. So as a cellar master, he has all right. He goes into the cask, he tastes the cask. And so I lead the product development team, right? And he, at the time, he was our cellar master and the master blender, right? So he sends an email to the entire product development team, and he said, whatever you guys are doing now, you need to stop and come down to the lab.
That's always a good email to get.
So,
maybe a little scary at first. You think something's gone horribly wrong, right?
Exactly. So I'm like, oh shit, like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm like, oh no, like, what the heck is carrying on? So I jump into my car and I race down to the distillery. When I get down there and the other guys come in, he said, I want you guys to taste this. So we tasted the product and everybody was looking on at each other and they're like, this is really, really good.
Yeah.
And he was like, so someone said, what's this? And he said he found it in the cellar. And I'm like, nah, you could have found it. The profile is completely different from
This isn't ours.
You know, this is you could have found it in the cellar. So then he pulls out his spec sheet and he starts reading what's on the spec sheet. And my managing director said, oh yes, I remember this project now. I remember this project. And then that's when he gave us the whole story that I gave you guys about how it came into being. And then the next question was, so what are we going to do with it?
Yep.
And I started to give some ideas like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Started to get our creative. And I was hit with a resounding no. The idea for this product was for it to be bottled at cask strength. And whatever the strength is, because of what they were trying to accomplish in terms of what that rectification column could give you. So this product was actually bottled before it was labeled.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So we had to bottle it and then order the labels afterwards, because only at bottling we knew what the bottling strength was going to be.
Okay.
Wow.
So after we bottled, then we sent away to get the labels printed. And then when the labels came, we did a labeling of the product.
So when they told you, hey, it's cool, you've got all these ideas, but we're just going to release it at cask strength because that's the plan. And it's this really high, it's not like it's, 55% cask strength. This is really high. Was your first reaction like, how am I going to sell all of this? Or were you confident that like the rum nerd community out there is going to love this?
Well, I knew the rum nerd community would love it.
But are there enough?
My only concern was at the 73.6%, it would have been too high to sell in duty free.
Oh, right. Yeah, good point.
Because the
can't put it on an airplane.
Right. So I said to the guys, if you do this at 73.6%, there is no way we're going to get this in the duty free and you're going to lose out on a captive market.
Yeah.
And the response was, and so what?
You said, thanks, guys, right?
That was the response. And so what? It's
wow.
X amount of bottles, like when it's done, it's done. That way, when you send it to Europe, you have nobody trying to, you have to get it from the market that it's allocated to.
Yeah.
You won't be able to fly with it. It's not going to be duty free. And I was like, okay, that's the case. Then I sent out the brief to all of my distributors and everyone was like, wow, 73.6%. That is interesting.
Sounds cool.
Once it hit the market and we started to do those rum shows and persons were tasting it, it was like, yeah. I was like, where can I buy? Like I remember I was at a rum show in that time. It was the California Rum Fest. I was in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And and I had a bottle with me. It didn't have on any label, right? And
it's the best kind of bottle to taste at a rum show. The one that has no label.
Yes, it had no labels on it.
Under the table.
Yes. So when I came up, I was with Martin at Smugglers and everything and so on. And so like when he tasted it, he was like, oh my gosh, Calbert, this is amazing stuff. And so everybody that was coming to the table And I was presenting them with English Harbour and everything, and they're like, okay, so now I'm done tasting.
Yeah.
What about that unlabeled
Tell me
stuff?
about that other thing. Yeah. They lean in real close and, lower their voice a little bit. Yeah.
But that was quite an experience. And everybody came over and they were like, wow, they've never had anything like this. And it was the feedback was really, really good.
So the question is, did your managing director kick himself for only asking for 8 barrels?
Exactly.
I guess he did privately.
Yeah.
I guess he did privately. He never did it in front of me. Yeah.
Is there any hope of people seeing that rum made again at Antigua Distillery in the future?
No,
it's a one-time.
It was a one-time thing.
One-time deal. Well, okay, so the high congener then, how did that come about? And what do you have to do to produce that rum differently?
So that is purely distillation, and so our master distiller and the distiller before him, they were all Jamaicans, right? Okay. And so what we did is that anytime we had excess, any year we had any excess capacity, they were given the leeway to do something funky.
Ah, okay.
And it's something that would have been made and just sitting inside of our cellar because we don't use it in our regular blends.
Right.
And as it's getting, more and more popular, to get something funky from us, it definitely has a different ring to it because you're not accustomed to getting that from us. And with that, it is, we've done stuff with Haramex where that is concerned, and with Velier in terms of the high congener releases.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, it's volume driven. You hit a certain number in a year, and then that's your reward. We send you a bunch of different samples, or unless you want to come to Antigua, you can come to our cellar, and we open up our cellar to you, and you get a couple of barrels. We bottle it at what ABV you want it, label it for you, and that's your reward for all the hard work you put inside of the track.
All right, we're rewarded with funky rum. That's the best kind of reward, right?
Yeah.
So it's all then done through distillation, then.
Through distillation, yeah.
Okay.
There's really no heavy blending.
Gotcha.
There was one more thing I wanted to ask about, Calbert, which was I had seen conflicting reports of whether or not there's anything added to any of the rum there. You mentioned kind of earlier about how Antiguans and maybe Barbudans like their rum, smooth and things like that. And sometimes that does mean additives. Was there ever a time when there were additives to English Harbour, and has that practice been discontinued, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
The answer to that is no.
Never?
That's a short answer. The only thing that you would have added is with Cavalier rum. And because it's in a clear bottle, it's only 2 years. We use a caramel coloring. It doesn't add any flavor.
Right.
And that gives it a uniform color throughout. So there's a color scale that we use.
Yeah.
But for our age rums, our 5-year, 10-year, and our cast finishes, the color that you see is the color that you get straight out of the barrel.
Shifting gears, I read an interview that you gave all the way back in 2017. And in it, you were asked, where do you see the rum industry in 5 years? And your response was really interesting to me. You said, I would like to see the creation of a rum academy funded by various rum brands being formed. I need to know more about this vision because I just saw the word Rum Academy and I was like, that sounds cool. Like, we need that. So in this your idea of a rum academy, who would attend it? What would the classes be like? What's kind of like the ideal dream version of this in your mind?
So before I came on the distribution side, my background is hospitality. And I used to work for a hotel group in Antigua. They were at that time they were called Antigua Resorts. They're now Elite Island Resorts. And I used to be the bar manager / supervisor / manager at one of their properties, right? And so, and this was all the way back in, finished, so between 99 to 2003.
Okay.
And so my go-to spirit in terms of making cocktails was always rum. And at the time, it would have been Cavalier because, as I said, English Harbour was not brought back until 2006.
Right.
So I prided myself with making a lot of rum cocktails, either with Cavalier Gold or Cavalier White, and even sometimes experimenting with the 151 proof. And so the first time I ever heard the term mixologist was when somebody referred to me as a mixologist when I made them a cocktail.
Okay.
And they're like, "You're no longer a bartender, you're a mixologist." And I was just, I've never heard the term before, right? So it was just something new and weird to me. So getting into the industry and seeing what other people are doing all across the world and looking what we're doing here in Antigua and by extension in the Caribbean. In terms of the cocktail culture, it's very elementary at best. But tourists love that elementary aspect, where they can come and they can get a pina colada that's very juicy and, very sweet and all that sort of stuff. They love that. But there is a market for metropolitan cocktails, cocktails that are trending and, the type of stuff that you're doing with rums. And when I started working in the international markets, that's when I realized that, hey, we're really behind the 8 ball with what we're doing in the Caribbean and in Antigua. So for us now, I wanted to establish almost like a school where persons can be schooled with the history of rum, right, in the Caribbean, on the different styles that we produce, right, cocktails, both classic and modern, talk about, infusions and all that sort of stuff. So that was my idea of a rum academy.
Well, I feel like all the big brands need to get behind this, pool their resources. I think it needs a big, campus down there somewhere in the Caribbean.
You need a teacher, I could be an adjunct.
Yeah, but, it's more than just a bartending school. It's all about the history,
right?
Behind each brand, and so that so that when you go to an island, there's an appreciation of the different styles.
Yeah.
And you know how to use those different styles in different cocktails and all that sort of stuff. So that was kind of my vision.
Well, we love it. I mean, I feel like that's part of what we're trying to do with this podcast is just get that the stories of all these styles out there, because I think that's part of what makes the whole, hobby of rum, the journey in rum so fascinating, is there's always another style, another culture, another history to learn about that's connected to rum. So, love it. I would love to enroll in the Rum Academy when it's open. So you'll have to let us know. Well, with all that, I feel like we've covered a lot of the history of the distillery, a lot of the releases. You hinted at a few things that are being discussed, things that maybe fall in between 18 and 25 years that may or may not be coming out sometime. Was there anything that we didn't get to that you guys are working on right now?
Well, like I said, it's our 90th anniversary. Yeah. And, we have a whole slew of activities happening starting from June of this year. The company was actually incorporated on June 3rd, 1933. So
coming up soon.
Yeah. So starting on June 3rd, well, the 4th is a Sunday. So we start with a church service, and then we have a whole year of activities. that we're gonna do. That's gonna run us all the way back until May of next year. Some of it are gonna be doing some throwback releases. We're gonna have a period where, because you can't do tours of the distillery, so we're gonna have a couple of periods throughout the year where we open up distillery for persons to come and see the process and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure a lot of a lot of videos are going to surface and pictures are going to surface online about the distillery. You know, there are different. There's this podcast that we're working on that deals with the different stages of production. Where you get into a master blender or distiller and all that sort of stuff. So there is, you know, and obviously there are a couple of releases that are going to come out as well during that year. So it's something that we're really looking forward to for our 90th anniversary.
If this is all happening for the 90th anniversary, I can't imagine what you're going to do for the 100th anniversry. You're going to have to go even bigger. You're going to have to do like, you're doing two releases for the 90th. You got to do like 4 or 5 for the 100th.
So it was so crazy. When I put out the plan, my managing director was like, this is really comprehensive for our 90th. This should be something that we do for 100th. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to be around in the next 10 years. So
Why wait?
That's not my issue. Let who is at the helm in 10 years, let them figure it out.
Yeah,
that's right.
90 is a big thing. And let me just go ahead and do my thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're glad you're getting all that special stuff out sooner instead of waiting. But before we go, we have one final segment on the show. It's a special bonus segment called the Rapid Fire Round that is concocted by my co-host John Gulla here. It's very different from the other questions, which were long and in depth. These are John. Do you want to share what's different about this segment?
Yeah, I guess I'm the master blender of the rapid fire round.
The master of ceremonies.
Yes. So what this is, Calbert, is we're going to ask you as many questions as we can in a timed period. And we want you to give as many short, quick, off the hip answers as you can so we can get through as many of these. There's no right or wrong answers. Be as serious as silly, hopefully silly as you want to be.
All right.
Are you up for the challenge?
Yes.
All right. I knew he was in already. I could tell from the whole time.
Yeah, we normally ask
no
people.
Doubt.
We kind of tiptoe around. Are you sure you want to do this? But we knew from the start that you'd be up for it.
Yeah, you're Mr. Personality. You're going to shine.
Okay. We tell people it's a generous 60 seconds. So I will say I have a generous 60 seconds on the clock and go.
All right. Neat or on the rocks?
On the rocks. Antigua is too hot to be drinking anything.
Okay. Column, pot, or blend?
Column, definitely.
I figured that
Natural
might be
answer.
the case. All right. Aged or unaged? Wow. A little more pause than I expected.
Yeah, I prefer unaged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the reason for that, I find with unaged, it's a lot more versatile in terms of what you can do for basic cocktails.
Okay.
And I like to make cocktails, and so I prefer something that is unaged. It has a bit more oomph, to punch through the flavors.
Yeah, you got to spread that out there in Antigua then. Molasses or cane juice?
Definitely molasses.
Okay. All right. If you could pick any animal to be the English Harbour mascot, what animal would it be?
It would be a frigate bird. And
okay, the frigate bird. Yeah. I've seen a lot that there's a lot of frigate birds there on Barbuda, right?
Yes.
I was going to say the rat would have been a good choice, though.
Nah, definitely the frigate bird.
They might not have gone for that. Okay.
Calbert knows a little bit more about selling rum than us.
Your favorite person to share a good bottle of English Harbour with?
Well, it's not one person. So I have this crew, we call the Wolfpack.
The Wolfpack.
The Wolfpack.
Yes, the Wolfpack.
There's your mascot.
So it will be definitely sitting down with Joe, Teddy, Kevin, and Ossie, and that's wow.
Get the group together. All right,
love it.
I believe you're a sports guy, Calbert. Can you settle something for us? Which sport is better, football or basketball?
So I grew up playing basketball, but I love football.
My man.
Okay.
I love football. And so being a basketball player and, can't sit down to watch a full basketball game unless the Lakers is playing.
Oh, come on. They are playing right now. They're in the playoffs.
they actually the conference finals. They lost last night.
It was a great game.
For football, I can sit and watch anybody play. So for me, definitely football.
Oh, man.
There you go, Will.
Taking the L on that one. All right.
All right. A bunch of people in the U.S. would say their dream vacation destination is Antigua. Mm-hmm. Where do Antiguas go for vacation?
States. England.
Okay. He's like, yeah, it's the opposite way around. Obviously, the States, plenty to do here. All right. While the success of the High Congener series has been great, is it true that the English Harbour 5 is going to be renamed the Low Congener series?
Hell no.
Maybe Congener Light? No?
Hell no.
All right.
And Calbert wants no more product ideas from us.
All right. Finally, Antigua or Barbuda are purported to have 365 beaches, one for every day of the year, which begs the question, what does one do in Antigua on the leap year day?
There is another one as always.
That's time. Just as we got to the 366th beach.
Hopefully you bring some good rum with you on that day.
Yes.
I have to circle back. If John and I ever make it down to Antigua, can you make us, I'm not asking for permanent, but just temporary honorary Wolfpack members?
Yes. especially if you come during Carnival. So
that's right. I will dress up. Yep.
Let me tell you, T-shirt mask, right? Everybody looks out for the Wolfpack.
Okay. Well, you guys have a reputation.
Wow.
Yes. Our T-shirts are different from everybody else's, and our T-shirts are sponsored by Calbert Rum.
That's awesome.
There's always some sort of encrypted message on our shirts
that only the Wolfpack understands.
There's always some sort of so people look out to see when we're coming on the road to see what our shirts are going to say. If you guys are rolling with us during T-shirt mask, you will get one of those shirts.
Oh yeah, man, I gotta get a Wolfpack shirt now. All right, that's a life goal now from here on out. Well, Calbert, thanks so much. I know you have a ton of stuff going on right now for Carnival, like you mentioned. You had to fight traffic to get to the interview, so
missed the Lakers game. Yep.
No Lakers game tonight. That's tomorrow, I believe, John.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, I have to say go Nuggets. I'm not cheering for the Lakers, but
go Heat. Go Heat.
Anyway, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out, Calbert. It was great catching up with you, and we'll be keeping an eye out for all that exciting 90th anniversary stuff.
Yeah, man.
That's right.
For sure. All right. Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. Thanks to Calbert Francis for coming through and telling us all about Antigua Distillery, English Harbour, some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline from them. If you have any English Harbour experiences to share, any Antigua experiences to share, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email, host@rumcast.com. It's host@rumcast.com. And you don't have to limit yourself to Antigua. We want to hear anything. If you've got episode ideas, people we should interview, topics we should talk about, we always love to hear from people. Let us know what you're drinking, what you're enjoying these days. It's always great to hear that. And if you're not an email person, if that's not really your thing, if you prefer the DMs, the social media, we're on there as well. John, where can they find us there?
Yeah, hit us up at the Rumcast at Instagram or Facebook or Twitter if you like, if you prefer. And we'll take any of those DMs or comments that you want to take there. In fact, you know what I want to hear, Will?
What?
I want to hear from people. I want to hear, similar to the intro for me, I want to hear what was some of the worst rums that somebody's had recently and why, and the best.
Okay. Yeah.
If I'm crazy, I just looked up on RumX, and apparently a lot of people, they're not a lot of people, some people like this Rum Deluxe Savannah Reunion that I talked about. So, there are lots of opinions out there. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear about it. But more so, I just want to hear from you all what has really turned you on to rum recently and what's turned you off. So
just send us your turn-ons and turn-offs. That's all we're asking for. Also, if you want even more Rumcast, we're on Patreon. We're doing bonus episodes, happy hours, all kinds of good stuff there. So you can join, support the show. It's patreon.com/the Rumcast. That's patreon.com/the Rumcast. 108 strong as of this recording now. So we'd love to see even more of you there. But as always, thanks to patrons for their support. It's awesome. We love getting to hang out with you guys every month. And John, I think that's it for this episode. So until next
Does
time.
108 qualify for dozens of us now? Can we say there are dozens of
beyond.
us?
I think it's beyond dozens. I think it's beyond dozens at this point.
Excellent.
All right. Can we say scores?
Scores. I don't know. That seems like a lot.
Isn't a score just 20?
I don't know. Is it? I don't remember
and however many years ago.
I think 7 years ago.
I think it's 20. So it's
maybe you're right. Yeah.
It's almost 2 dozen. So I think we could say there are scores. There are scores of us.
All right.
Now.
There's scores of us. Okay.
All right. Well, if you want to join the scores, go to patreon.com/the Rumcast. At any rate, we'll see you all soon for the next episode.
See you next time.